Assalamualaikum and good afternoon to Datin Nur Freida binti A. Bakar, Timbalan Pengarah Sektor Pembelajaran Jabatan Pendidikan Negeri Selangor, Puan Hajah Hanisah binti Muhammad Yusof, KPPK Bahasa, Sektor Pembelajaran, Cik Zairah binti Zulkifli, Penolong Pengarah Bahasa, Sektor Pembelajaran, State Language Officers, SSC Plus from all districts of Selangor, our panel of presenters and all attendees. Welcome to our webinar session entitled Year 5 Curriculum Induction, Ironing Out the Creases, Part 2. And this is organized by the State Language Department. So I'm Syarifah Nazurah binti Abdul Khalib from SK Batu Belaklang and I will be your moderator today. Thank you everyone for making the time to join us today. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, allow me to first share with all of you a little bit of this webinar and the objectives of this webinar. This webinar has two parts. So yesterday we had our part 1 and we discussed on introduction to CFR, differentiation instructions, formative assessment, listening skills, and also speaking skills. We had viewers from all around Malaysia and we managed to share a very clear explanation and examples on the topics, and we answered few questions posted by the viewers. So today, for our part 2, we will be talking about reading skills, writing skills, language art, and language awareness. So just to recap back on the objective for our webinar, which are the first one, to have an overview of the Year 5 English Language Curriculum, whether it's CFR aligned, and to identify the curriculum documentation, which is the SKP, SOW, syllabus, textbook, and also to explore the purpose of each document. And the last one is to have an overview of the lessons in SOW according to the skills and also language arts. So overall, this 2 days webinar will be packed with information regarding the new Year 5 English curriculum. And before we start, let me lay out a few housekeeping matters. So the first one, the attendance link will be shared approximately 15 minutes before we end this webinar. So do look up for it. Second, we would love to hear from you during today's presentation. If you have any questions for our presenters, please feel free to send the question through our chat box and the presenter will be answering the question at the end of their own session. And if we don't get to your questions during this webinar, we will be surely to follow up with you afterwards. And lastly, we would encourage you to like, subscribe, and share today's webinar in your social network. There are a lot of info that you can find and you can get from all the speakers, and all of them are well trained in this area. So without further ado, let's move on by introducing the first presenter for today. So with us today is Miss Madihah binti Murtadza. She is a state and district JU for CFR with 7 years of experience, and currently she is teaching at SK Taman Bukit, Indah, Ampang. And she is here today to present on the topic reading and writing skills. So with that, over to you, Miss Madihah.
All right, thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, teachers and friends. So as our Miss Moderator have mentioned earlier on, my name is Madihah. You can call me Miss Madihah or Madihah. So as for today, I will be sharing with you about reading and writing skill. But before I move to my topic, my presentation, let's just recap what we had yesterday during part 1. So what happened, we had 3 presenters yesterday, as Miss Syarifah has mentioned. So we started with Miss Lim, whereby she talked about the CFR framework, basically the information we had during curriculum familiarization. And then she talked about the global scale, which is the A1 until C2. And for primary, she did stress on that we are focusing on mild A1, low A1 and mild A2. And then later on, she touched on the lesson cycle for SK and SJK. After Ms. Lim, we've moved on to Ms. Freida, whereby Ms. Freida she talked about formative assessments and also differentiated strategies. For formative assessment, she shared with us briefly on how the techniques for formative assessment. There are quick pupil response. and then effective questioning and also feedbacks. And there are more techniques that she did share it with us. This is a few that I managed to catch on yesterday. And then later on, she moved on to the differentiated strategies, which we had around, I think there's 7 differentiated strategies that she did touch on yesterday. After we have touched on the theoretical parts and the frameworks, we moved on to Ms. Vilo, whereby she touched on listening and speaking lessons. And during listening lesson, Ms. Vilo did touched in details about SMART learning objective. So my function today here is that I'm going to proceed with reading and writing skills. So I have the slide up. Yep. So yes, I'm going to move on to the topic that I'm assigned with. So the topic is on reading skills. So next slide, please. Thank you. So for reading skills today, it's like it's a continuous lessons from what Miss Philos have presented yesterday on listening and speaking, which is on the same unit, Unit 5, Year 5, on the topic food and health. As you can see from the slide, you can refer to SOW. For SK, it is on lesson 91. Unfortunately for SJK, there is no lesson provided. And the reason is because, can we go to the next slide, please? Yes. Okay, let's look at the table for SK. Okay, so as SK, as you can see, there are a few cycles. We started off with listening, speaking, reading, writing, language arts, and consolidation. That is the first cycle. And then look at the second one. It is still the same cycle: listening, speaking, reading, writing, language arts, and consolidation. However, as we move on to the next cycle, there's listening, speaking, reading, writing, language arts, and language awareness. So as you can see, there's language awareness has been alternate with consolidation lesson. Yeah. So that one is for SK. However, for SJK, all right, let's look at the cycle. Okay, we started with lesson number 9. SJK start with listening, speaking, and then writing. For the next cycle, still they started off with listening, speaking, and then reading and language awareness. As you can see, there's the cycle is not similar to the one in SK. The reason being is because SJK has lesser time per week as compared to SK. So that's why SJK has lesser lesson as compared to SK, but that doesn't mean that SJK did not cover what we SK has covered. Yeah, it's the same lesson, which I will show you later. And I think Ms. Vilo has also showed you yesterday as well why SK and SJK's lesson is similar. However, the number of lesson is little as compared to SK. All right, to the next slide, please. So the learning standards for reading skills in reference to our SOW. So the main skills is for reading, to guess the meaning of unfamiliar words from clues provided by title, topic, and other known words. So based on the main skills given here, pupils are needed to guess the meaning, which means they need to read the clues from the titles or the topics or any other words or vocabulary provided, and they have to guess the meaning of the words. And then for complementary skills, still on reading skills, so students will use with the support of familiar print and digital resources to check for meaning. All right, next slide, please. So the learning objective would be, for the main learning objective would be to read. Pupils will be able to read and guess the meaning of at least 6 words from the text read. As you can see, we have tried to cover the SMART learning objective, which is specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. Yeah. All right. For the second objective would be use a dictionary to check the meaning of at least 6 words. Still focusing on SMART learning objective, whereby we have the focus one, at least 6 words, and also the time bound, where by the end of the lesson, and also the student have to actually, it is measurable and attainable by the student within the time given. All right, next slide, please. So this is a snapshot of lesson 91 from the SOW. For your information, basically the lessons, what me and my friends are sharing right now is basically we have looked through the documents And basically by referring to the documents, we come up with our own lessons as discussed together. So this is actually the lesson that we have snapshot from the SOW. So here's the full suggested activity. I repeat, suggested activity for lesson 91 on reading skills. And the next slide is, next slide please, thank you. So this is exactly the page number that we are focusing on, reading activity, which is on page 54. So the student will be looking at this text. Yeah, okay, next slide please. So based on the SOW we have shared earlier on, so we have tried to adopt and adapt the lesson to make it more suitable for, like, for example, my students. So for the pre-lesson, we have the pupils to brainstorm based on the title and the 2 photos, which is actually in page 54. Before we actually move on to the text itself, teachers are encouraged. Here, it's just like a suggested lessons, just to actually remind you, this is not like exactly something that the lesson that you can actually use. Maybe you can just adopt and adapt to fit your students. So here we can start off with pictures. So basically, can I go to the next slide? Yes, so basically this is the pictures, as like we say, like they're like a prompter for the student before we move on to reading. So basically from the text, this is like a visual text, visual print, and also the title of the text. So from here, teachers can actually prompt the students and guess what exactly the text that we are going to read on. So based on these 2 pictures, and maybe students would actually come up with their own answers, and of course supported and also by the teachers, guided by the teachers. You can use mind map, you can use circle map to actually jot down or put down students' answer. All right, the next slide would be lesson delivery. As we have prompted the students with the pictures and the topic, we move on to the lesson delivery where reading comes in. All right, so for the second activity, pupils will read the interview text and match the 4 questions correctly. Okay, as you can see from the slide, we have in bracket the S, which is referring to differentiated strategies, which is support. And then we have FA, which is formative assessment, which is peer assessment. From this part in the activities 2, what happened is that, as you can see, pupils will be reading the interview. And of course, we have groups of students, probably the most proficient ones and the less proficient one. So for differentiated by support, it means that probably the most proficient students, you can actually get and allow them to be independent and read the interview text without help. And then for the less proficient one, maybe we can provide them with a sentence strip. Okay, can we move on to the next slide so we can see clearly what actually the activity is about? All right, okay. So this is the text. As you can see, probably for the less proficient student, this is a bit wordy for them. And also to match for the smaller part, read the text. For the second picture, the smaller part pictures. So that one is also a snapshot from textbook. What happened is probably it's too small for our less proficient students to actually read it out. So what happened, we can actually differentiate the text by making it in a smaller strip, or maybe a bigger strip, which is like more suitable for our less proficient student. Whereby for the most proficient student, we can actually allow them to actually freely do the activity. What happened is that the students have to actually read the whole text and then match the question with the gaps given here. And then later, the student, after they have read through, they need to actually decide whether the lifestyle of the sumo is healthy or unhealthy. So that is where we check their understanding, and that is where the student have to guess whether they think that from the interview, the sumo had a healthy lifestyle. All right. So basically, it is the same.
Sorry, Miss Madihah.
Content. Yes.
Sorry, is it possible for you to slow down a bit?
Oh, sure. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Sorry. Thank you so
No
much.
worries.
Okay.
I'll try
I
to
think
slow
because
down.
it's like excited,
Yeah, I got a bit excited. All right.
All right, you're good to go.
All right. Okay, I'll just move on, yeah? All right. So for this text, what happened is that students are given the same text. Maybe for the proficient student, we can actually let them do it on their own. which means they can actually read and match the question by referring to the textbook. But for the less proficient student, maybe we can actually try to enlarge the print, maybe make it in a sentence strip so that they can actually read better and match it with the correct number from the text. So this is the differentiated strategy suggested. And then eventually, the students have to actually guess whether the lifestyle of the sumo is healthy or unhealthy based on what they have read and understood from the text given. All right, so for formative assessment, what happened is that after they have matched it, teachers can actually pair up the students and they can actually check their answers, whether they both got the same, they actually match it correctly, or maybe they have a different matchings. So there we can actually check, have students to be independent as on their own learning, whereby they will be actually checking on their peers as well as their own. And then later, probably teacher can actually comes in and share the correct answers for the students. During this session, students can actually see whether they have understood it right and where they go wrong. Okay, so pair work and also eventually intervention from the teacher. But it is advisable for the less proficient student to have more support from the teachers as compared to the most proficient, because we want to allow the most proficient student to be independent and also have their own thoughts and also opinion on the matter, on the text given. Okay, can we move on to the next slide? Yes, for still under lesson delivery, after they have read through the text and understand the text and also come up with probably the sumo is having an unhealthy lifestyle. So teachers, this is actually the same script from the textbook. Okay, what happened is that it is quite a different text given, but basically still the same context, whereby student will read the text and try to fill in the gaps. All right. So when they want to fill in the gaps, they have to understand the initial text they have read. Then they can actually fill in the text. So basically, there are a few words given up there. So there's like 5 gaps. So students have to fill in the right answer. And also here, teachers, we can actually encourage students to still do peer assessment, whereby maybe they can assist each other before we come and intervene. All right. Okay, next slide, please. All right, for the next one, then pupil can actually use the dictionary to find the meaning of the 6 focused vocabulary. So after we have gone through the text, we have checked the understanding by using a different script, different text to check their understanding of the text. Then we can actually get the student to take their dictionary to check the meaning of the 6 focused vocabulary. So this one is actually written in SOW. It isn't adopted or adapted. So I took it because it complements our complementary skills. Okay, can we move on to the next slide? Yes. So as you can see, it is still the same page 54. But if you can look through, probably it's not that clear. So there's a bolded in blue, like 6-word bolded in blue. So these are the focused words as suggested from the SOW. But teachers, of course, you can adopt and adapt if you think that your student is able to, they can actually go beyond than 6 words. Probably there are more time to actually spend. You can just exceed it more than 6 or maybe 10. But if you think that your students couldn't even find 6 words, so you can just make it lesser, probably 3. Yeah, it depends on your students. And also, of course, we can do differentiated here as well. So students can find the meaning of the words by using dictionary. You can also actually divide the students in group works. Maybe one group would do 1 word or maybe 3 to 4 words, and then you try to find other words from the text where the other group would actually find it in a dictionary and they would later share among the groups. Yep. Okay, so for the next one. All right, for the next activity, so we have moved on to the post lesson. After they have read the text, we have checked on their understanding of the text, and also they have actually used dictionary. They learn how to use dictionary and also finding the meaning of the words focused. So we can actually play a game, maybe a 5 minutes game. Here we suggested that a taboo game whereby the students have to guess the word they have learned today. So what happened, probably in past, the student being questioned cannot use the word they have learned. For me, there's six focus vocabulary. So they can't use the 6 words given. They have to explain it to their pair until their pair understood and get the right vocabulary that fits the meaning or their explanation. All right. So if it's only like 5 minutes, so maybe you can actually pair them up or maybe group them up. And then, okay, one group would get one word and then they would guess the word. So it is called a taboo game. So this is for post lesson to end the reading session. All right. So basically that is on reading activities. So can we move on to the next slide? So okay. So basically this script here is taken from SOW. So for your information, in our SOW, there are a few suggested pre and post lessons whereby it functions to help us if, let's say, we are stuck at coming up with our own pre-lessons or post lessons. So here for the post lesson that I have shared earlier on, I have actually taken it from our SOW. We have taken it from our SOW and adapted to fit probably my style and also my student. So in post lesson task 3, you can check in the SOW. It is a sample from a lesson Test My Friend. So what happened is that the pupils, still in pairs, and then they will be asking quiz questions still on vocabulary and language content and also, language and also content of the lesson, which actually tallies with our learning objective. And then we have asked the student to write a set of minimum of numbers. So you don't have to actually follow all 4 steps. You can actually adopt and adapt it to suit your needs and the student's need. Okay, can we move on to the next slide? Yes. So, okay. So our lessons are done. Our lesson is done for reading skills. So here I would like to actually point out the differentiation strategy that we have chosen for the reading skills, the reading lesson today. So what happened is we choose strategy 2, which is type and amount of support. Okay. I have also mentioned the sentence strip. So what happened that during activity 2, we had the text. So for the less proficient student, what happened? We provide them with the larger print or maybe in a sentence strip for them to actually see and also match with the gap, fill in the gaps with the correct questions. So as compared to like referring to the textbook, that might be a bit tricky for the student to actually read from one part here to the other part, and it's a bit wordy. So what happened with strip, the student can actually just match it up with the number. So, and then maybe for the, better proficient student, we can actually give them the independence. And maybe if you want to, if you're a bit, want to try a different text, still under the same content, still using the same language, maybe you would alter a bit some of the words to a bit, challenging words for the students, the better proficient student, then it would be also, it depends on your students. If you feel like you want to change the words, then you're adopting and adapting, which is the same thing that we have actually learned during learning material adaptation back then during a CFR course. So it is up to you, you know your students better. All right, so that one is for differentiation strategy. Okay, can we move on to the next slide? So the next slide would be on formative assessment. So the assessment that we had for reading lessons was peer assessment. As you can see, formative assessment does not only needed to be at the back of the lesson. You can start it off with assessment as well, or also you can start in the middle. For this lesson, we had peer assessment starting during the delivery session and moved on to activity number 4 or 5. And then during the post, it's just a matter of like playing games and also this like to checking their understanding. So this is the formative assessment we have chosen for reading skills. Okay, can we move on to the next slide? Yes. So as we have looked through the differentiated strategies and also the formative assessment, we need to look at the performance levels. So this is actually performance levels taken from our TSKP. So yes, again, referred back to your DSKP, to the documents we were given. So basically I've copy pasted them and put it in the slide. So after we had the lessons, we can actually check our students. So let's look at number 1. This is TP1. So for students with TP1, so these students can actually guess meaning of a very few unfamiliar words. So we are focusing on 6 words. So maybe as we flowed through the lesson, we identified that our less proficient student can actually guess the meaning of, like, probably out of 6 they can guess 3 or 4 or maybe 5. So from the clues given from the title, and then they can actually use a limited range of dictionary skills. Again, for example, just now we have done differentiated strategies. So this is where you can actually check whether your student is in TP1, TP2 or TP3. So let's look at TP2. So students can guess meaning of some. For number 1, it's very few. But as we move on to TP2, it is some unfamiliar words, still by using a limited range of dictionary skills with a lot of support. Still need support for TP1 and TP2. But as we move along to TP3, we can actually see the students still can guess the meaning of unfamiliar words, which means maybe they can guess 6. Maybe if you put in your objective only 4 words, then they can actually guess 4 words from the clues and also use dictionary skills adequately. So that actually differentiates students of TP2 and also TP3. So it is important for us, before we put the TP for our students, we need to look through at the performance level. It is in our DSKP. Please look through. Yeah? Okay. Next one, the next slide. Okay, this one is for TP4 until TP6. For students of TP6, still the same one. Student can guess the meaning of unfamiliar words, which means the 6 words we are focusing. All right, as well as using dictionary skills according to the given task, which means they don't need support, they can do it on their own. All right, but probably they're struggling a bit. Okay, probably they're struggling a bit, but let's look at TP5. The difference would be the students can use the dictionary skills to the given task with ease, which means they are a bit we can see that they are comfortable with dictionary, be it using their devices or maybe using the dictionary book. So we can see that the students, probably those who actually can guess it or maybe give you the answers the first as compared to the other friends. So this student we can actually provide them with giving them TP5. Okay, and last but not least, TP6. All right, so students can guess the meaning of the unfamiliar words, which is again the 6 words, effectively, which means they are like confident already. They don't need our help. They know actually how the dictionary works. Yeah. So this is the difference between students at TP4, 5, and 6. How they actually handle dictionary. Yeah. All right. Okay. And then can we move on to the next slide? Okay, so basically that is on reading skills. So again, just to summarize a bit on reading skills. So reading skills, we for unit number 5, food and health, we look at page 54 and we try to adopt and adapt. And also we try to actually look at the SOW and use the suggested activity there and adopt and adapt it to suit our students. And towards the end, before we actually close our lessons of the day, we referred again to our DSKP, to the performance level, to actually check whether our students actually fits which TP. So of course, before we conduct the lesson itself, we have to actually tag the TP, the performance level, so that we can actually group our students. Let's say we have like 40 students, of course we need to revise the performance level first. Then later, after we have actually conducted the lesson, we can actually have an overview on what happens during the lessons and which students can do or cannot do or need more interventions and help from us. So that is on reading skills. All right. Yes. So moving on to writing skills. Okay. Again, under the same unit, unit 5. All right. We're going to move on to the writing skill. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Okay, yes. For the topic food and health, for SK, you can refer to lesson 92. Teachers, if you have your SOW with you, you can actually look at the SOW. All right, for SJK, it is on lesson 55. It is exactly the same lesson, but the numbering is a bit different. Okay, next slide, please. All right, sure, thank you. So for the learning standard for writing, this is again from the SOW. It is written there, we can just like take out. So it's a writing skills. So for the main skill would be to use the capital letters, full stops, commas and lists, and question marks in independent writing at the discourse level. So if you see there, I have underlined capital letter. So what happened during this lesson? Okay, can we move on to the next slide? Yes. So for the learning objective, what happened? We tried to focus on capital letters first. All right. To the previous slide, please. Yes. So in the learning standard, as you can see, they have listed capital letters, full stop, commas, and question mark. But teachers, our skills are repetitively throughout the year. Our skills are repeated. So for example, for this first cycle, you want to focus on capital letters. Or maybe you want to focus on capital letters and full stops and commas only. So you can do that and put it in your learning objective. You don't have to actually like one shot everything. You can do it depending on your students. But make sure as the next cycle comes in, you will cover the next part, which is probably maybe you missed out question mark. So then on the next lesson, you cover question marks. All right. Okay. Next slide, please. Yes. So for the learning objective, so we have chosen to write at least 3 sentences about a sumo wrestler's life with the correct punctuation, such as using capital letters correctly. So for this particular lessons, we are focusing on capital letters. So teachers, again, if your students are able enough, they are like proficient enough to use capital letter, you want to focus more on probably other punctuations, please do so. You adopt and adapt it to meet your students' need. All right. So as you can see again from the objective, it is still under Sumo's Wrestler's Life. So we are referring to the same text, which is page 54. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, for the second learning standard, which is the complementary skill, okay, we're going to do reading skills, which is use with support familiar print and digital resources to check meaning, which means again, after we have used dictionary for reading skills, reading lessons, again, we are going to practice again using the dictionary during writing lesson. So for the complementary skills, we are going to use dictionary. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so for complementary learning objective, so students will check the meaning of at least 4 words using print or digital resources. So I didn't put here specifically dictionary because I tried to actually explore more. Maybe last lesson we tried dictionary, maybe this time around I would like the student to explore more. Maybe they can use Google search, or maybe the dictionary they can find over the net. Yeah, so this is like probably to actually expose maybe the better proficient student, and so that we can actually focus more on the less proficient student with the dictionary usage. All right, next slide, please. So yes, as I mentioned earlier on, it is still under the same text, even though it is written there reading clearly. But from the SOW, they suggested us to actually use this page, page 54, to actually come up with our writing lesson. Okay, all right, next slide, please. Yes, this is exactly the lesson flow from SK lesson 92 and SJK lesson 55. So the flow is like, there are like 6 flows, all right? So as again, we have tried to adopt and adapt it to fit my students, our students, all right? So let me just go through the SOW. So for the pre-lesson, students will write on board the gap-filled sentences in optional activity. So here they suggest us to look at teacher's book. Right? Some schools, I mean, we are provided with teacher's book where we had to share. And some teachers maybe go extra miles and get themselves a new their own teacher's book. It's up to you, teachers. So Yeah, you can actually, if you have teacher's book, you may refer to it. But if you don't have it, it's okay, teachers, because remember, we can actually adopt and adapt the lesson. All right. Okay. So, and then for the second activity, it is suggested in SOW that pupils work in pairs. All right. So they need to decide if the restless life is interesting or not. All right. And then give 3 reasons. And then they have to choose some pairs to read their text aloud. So here, students will actually write their own opinion and then share it with their pairs. So if you think that activity number 2 is a bit difficult for your students, maybe you can adopt and adapt it, or maybe you can discard it if you disagree with it. Right? It is up to you, and come up with it, the activity that actually fit your student. And then for number 3, pupils do activity 1, follow instruction in teacher's book. Again, they are referring to teacher's book, but teachers, it's okay. Our focus is the main book that we are focusing on is our DSKP and then our textbook. First would be our DSKP and SOW, all right? And then our textbook, all right? So basically, if you don't have teacher's book, it's fine. But if you have it, you can actually refer to it and maybe make amendments that fit your students, all right? So, and then for page activity number 3, as you can see, they are referring to page 52 and 53. So basically, they are recycling the words, the vocabulary learned during listening and speaking. So in writing skills, actually, in writing lessons, what happened as in the SOW, they actually encouraged us to actually recycle the vocabulary learned. Because in writing, the student have to write their own opinion, whether they think that the restless life is interesting or not. So maybe if they disagree with it, they can come up with the actually meals that they have learned during listening and speaking and actually put it in their write-ups. Yeah. And then for activity number 4, pupils do activity 2, which is in the textbook, where the students will look at the food and check the meaning of the words in the box. This is where dictionary comes in. And then for number 5, the student will compare the words with the partner. Peer assessment again. And then finally, for post-lesson, the SOW suggested that pupils will draw a fruit or vegetable face, then describe it using there's a some or there are many or some. So as you can see, why is it suddenly post-lesson they touched on these sentences? So teachers, if you look at the textbook on page 52, I think it's around 52 or 53, they did touch on there's a or there's some or there are many or some. In fact, in the sumo text itself, they actually included these sentences. So we can actually integrate these sentences during our lessons. And don't worry, because during language awareness lesson, we can actually touch more on these sentences and the grammar part of it. Yeah. So basically, it is like integrated in before we really go into details on these sentences during language awareness. So, however, teachers, this is the flow suggested in SOW. If you think that this is too overwhelming and I don't think my student can actually do it, so we can actually change it to alter it to fit our students' need. But always, always, always refer back to your learning objective and also main and complementary learning standards. All right, next slide, please. Yes, so this is the one we have adapted. So for pre-lesson, we decided to choose the same pre-lesson as suggested in SOW, where the student will write on board the gap-filled sentences and they will complete with 6 words from the previous lessons learned during reading skills. Can we move on to the next slide so that we can see it clearly? Yes, so this is the gap sentences. Okay, here it is suggested that we write on board, but teachers, you're creative. Let's say during PDPR, of course, we don't have board. Let's say even if like it's a classroom lesson, you would like to come up with the slide or anything, it's up to you. You can adopt and adapt the materials. So basically, the students have to fill in the gaps by using the 6 recycled vocabulary learned during reading lessons previously. All right, this is to check the understanding of the word and also whether they still remember what they have learned previously. All right, okay, next slide, please. This is for pre-lesson. Okay, for lesson delivery, for activity number 2, the pupils will decide and write in 3 sentences or more if a sumo wrestler's lifestyle is healthy or not. Okay, teachers, if you remember just now, we talk about the sumos, it was a different topic. Can we move on to the SOW, please? One more slide previously. Again. One more slide, please. Yes, okay, thank you. So let's look at number 2, lesson delivery number 2. So here it is mentioned the student have to decide if a restless life is interesting or not, and they need to come up with 3 reasons. So what happened, we tried to change it during our activity number 2. Okay, can we move on to the slide, the last slide just now? Yes. Yes, all right, this one. So we alter it a bit, still under the same topic, still using the same text reference, but we want the student to actually come up with their own sentence, write their own sentences, and decide whether, according to their own opinion, the sumo restless lifestyle, is it healthy or not? And again, they can actually write and think of 3 reasons why it is healthy or it isn't healthy in accordance to their own opinion. All right, so here in bracket, I have put differentiated strategies, task, or support. When I said differentiated strategies, task, again, the same thing. Maybe, for example, for a better proficient student, you can actually give them the freedom to actually talk, or maybe, to actually write more than 3 sentences, or maybe they can write a paragraph or 2 about it. All right, and maybe they can write more than 3 reasons. But for the less proficient students that you have identified, maybe they need more support, so we can provide them more guidance. Or let's say your students are like proficient enough in writing, but maybe they don't have the ability to actually come up with 3 reasons. So for the better proficient, you can actually let them talk about anything. It's a free writing. But for the less proficient one, you can actually support them by giving them structured. Okay, tell us why it's not healthy and give us 3 reasons. So that is more structured. So it is up to you, teachers. So by support, it means that the amount of time you have given to your student. Let's say for the better proficient student, you can actually let them do it on their own independently. But the less proficient, you give them more of your time and actually support and guide them in their writing. Still again on page 54, whereby they need to read and then write their opinions. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so this is the same page 54, so where they will read, understand, and write their own opinion. They can actually pick up some of the sentences from the text and make the sentences one of reasons why they think whatever opinion they are giving. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so for lesson delivery, activity number 3, after they have written down their opinions and there are 3 reasons, so teachers will instruct the students to compare peer assessment, their writing with partners, whereby the students will check punctuations. Remember, in learning objective, we focuses on capital letter. Maybe I haven't started teaching them capital letter. So this is the lesson where I want to actually stress more on capital letters. So students can actually check their peers' work and then check the capital letter and the spelling. And if needed, they can actually use a dictionary to find the meanings. Maybe they are paired up with the less able and better proficient students. So the student with the less able proficiency, maybe they can actually use the dictionary to check, and maybe the pair can actually help the students with the dictionary and also checking on the meanings. All right, next slide, please. So for post-lesson, after they have done peer assessment, so pupil will share or draw their favorite food. Okay, just now, it is written in SOWs, pupils will draw vegetables or fruit. So maybe I would like to change a bit, but still under the topic food. All right, pupils will draw or share their favorite food and describe if it's healthy or not healthy. Again, teachers, this is a writing lesson. If you think that there are enough time for the students to write probably in one sentence, so please feel free to do so. If let's say you only have a few minutes to go, they can actually just spill it out. Okay, all right. Okay, next slide, please. Yes, so for as the lessons, okay, so we have done with the post lesson, which means our lesson is done. So here I would like to stress again on the differentiation strategy that we have used for writing lesson. So the strategy used is strategy 1, which is task. Okay, this one, you can find this in SOW. All right, strategy 1, which means different task to more proficient and less proficient student. Okay, for activity 2, what happened was that the student, for the more proficient student, will be given the freedom to write freely their thoughts on sumo wrestlers' lifestyle. But for the less proficient student, maybe teachers will give more guidance, or maybe give them a structured question where they can just like write it in a structured manner. All right. Okay. All right. Okay. Next slide, please. All right. So for formative assessment, we have again peer assessment where students, pupils, will actually check their peers' work and then compare with them theirs, as well as checking on their capital letters. So let's see, they are paired up in a different group of proficient group. So actually, the better proficient can actually help the less proficient pupil. So this is from activity number 3, right? All right, next slide, please. Okay, as we are done with the differentiated strategies and also the formative assessment, of course, we have to look at the performance level. So this is the performance level. Teachers, if you notice, I only shared with you the main skills performance level. Yeah. But let's say if you think that it is best to focus on the main performance level, then it is fine. But if you want to focus on both, it is also fine. All right. Okay. So for this part here, we are focusing on writing. So again, use capital letters, full stop, commas, and question mark independent writing over at discourse level. So here we focuses more on capital letters. So let's look at TP1. For TP1, the student can display minimal ability to spell words and use punctuation, as well as connect sentences into a paragraph, which means the students still need to write in a paragraph, but they need a lot of support. All right. But for TP2 students, okay, they can spell the words and they can use the punctuation. So teachers, can you see here, for writing in year 5, the students needs to be able to write in a paragraph. It doesn't matter if they need more support from us or if they can write it independently, but we need to start to teach them to write in a paragraph. So for TP2, students can spell words and use punctuations, as well as connect sentences into a paragraph with a lot of support. Still need a lot of support from us. So maybe you can provide them with structured, or maybe you give them more of your time to actually help them come up with the sentences. All right. So for TP3 students, where students can spell words accurately. So probably for TP1 and TP2 students, the students are still struggling with spellings. So that means if they are struggling with spelling, that means they are TP1 and TP2. But if they're fine with spelling, they are automatically in TP3, which, okay, they can spell words accurately and use punctuations, as well as connect sentences into 1 or 2 coherent paragraphs. All right. So for TP1 and TP2, we need to support them to write at least 1 paragraph. But for TP3 student, yes, of course, they need our help a bit, but they have no problem with spelling, but they can actually write at least 1 or 2 coherent paragraphs. Right, next slide. Okay, for the next one, for TP4, so the student can spell words accurately just like TP3, all right, and then connect sentences into 1 or 2 coherent paragraphs, still the same, but with very few relevant details. Maybe for TP3, they can write it coherently, but TP4, they have like relevant details, which means they have facts. Yeah, all right, they write it. I mean, we can actually comprehend what they're writing, all right? For TP5, can spell words accurately, still the same. Sentences into 1 or 2 coherent paragraphs, still the same with some relevant, maybe more than the one in TP4. But as for 6, okay, the students can write into 1 or 2 coherent paragraphs creatively. This is probably they have like more vocabulary. All right. Okay. So maybe they can actually be creative in their writings. Yeah. So this is where you can actually award them with DP6. So this is the performance level for writing. So teachers, I would like to encourage everyone to look into performance level after our lesson is done, because this would actually help us a bit in actually assessing our students formatively. Okay, remember teachers, when we say formative assessment, the assessments is done to actually improve on our lessons, as well as actually identify which students that we can actually intervene and come up with an intervention to help them out after the lesson is done, and also to improve on the next lesson. So yeah, so basically formative assessment is not like summative. Summative is where we check the student's understanding, but for formative we are checking, of course, the understanding, but to actually help us for the next lesson. All right, okay, all right, I think basically that is all. Do you have another slide? I don't think so. Yep. Great. I think that is all from me. That is all from me for reading and writing. It is actually a continuous lesson from the lessons shared by Miss Vilo yesterday. Yep. Thank you so
All
much.
right. Thank you so much, Miss Madihah. It was a very clear explanation, and I guess all the teachers can actually benefit from your presentation. They can actually do the interest activities that you suggested. All
Mm-hmm.
right. So if you have, for all the viewers, if you have any question, please do feel free to write your questions in the comment section, so that during the Q&A section later we can answer your questions, or if there's anything that you don't understand. All right. Thank you again, Miss Madihah.
Thank you.
Now let's move on to our second presenter. I would like to invite Mr. Fei Fan, who is also a state and district JU for CFR with 9 years of teaching experience, and he is currently a Ketua Panitia at SJKC Pandamaran B, Klang. And today he will be presenting on language awareness and language art. So without further ado, I welcome you, Mr. Fei Fan.
All right. Thank you, Miss Moderator, and a very good afternoon to everyone. Can everybody hear me? I need to have some
Yes, we can
response
hear
first.
you.
All
Yes, we
right.
can hear you, Mr.
Right now, the technician, my slides on the stage, right? All right. So I can show my screen now. Okay, can everybody see my slide?
Can we have it in full view, please, Mr. Ma?
Hello?
Mr. Ma, can we have it
Again?
in full view, please? The slides, can we have it in full
Is
view?
it not in the full view?
Not
How
yet.
about now? Is it full? Maybe it takes some time, yeah? It takes some
Hold
time.
on, the slide is not
How
there.
about now? But from what I see from the YouTube, it is already in the full screen mode.
Yeah, it's already it's in full view.
It is
It's
in
all
full
good.
view now, right? All right. Okay, so yeah, thank you again, Miss Moderator, for the introduction just now. Okay, so let me begin my presentation with the topic grammar and the CEFR. All right, so talking about grammar, maybe most of the teachers might think that that is the most boring part of the lesson, but it is not necessarily to be conducted in the boring manner. All right. But before we start planning our lesson for grammar lessons, right, we need to take note that grammar points are actually not listed in the CEFR can do statements, because in our CEFR can do statements, they focus on what people can do with the language, or in another way, the language functions that pupils are expected to do. So, in order to identify the grammar points or the grammar forms that need to be taught in your lessons, you have to kind of analyze the content from the unit, okay? And we have to identify the grammar forms that pupils might use for some function. So the most important thing here in the teaching of grammar is that we look at what kind of language functions that they can perform. So for example, we look at the language function about asking about ability. So teachers can kind of plan your grammar lessons based on the language structures that helps pupils to ask about ability. All right, so maybe it will involve grammar points such as the use of modal verbs and the use of interrogative sentences or things like that. Okay, so teachers need to be able to identify the grammar points on their own. But of course, later on, I will share with you some of the strategies for teachers to identify those grammar points. Okay, I will talk about that later on. So this is also true in the learning standards in the new curriculum, in which the grammar points are not stated directly in the learning standard. So I'm showing you the examples here. Okay, the first example here is taken from the can-do statement, okay, from the curriculum. So from the can-do statement, it is stated that can use simple descriptive language to make brief statements about and compare objects and possessions. From this statement, the grammar points are not direct, right? So teachers, you need to be able to find out the relevant grammar points in order to perform this particular language functions. So the examples given here, the relevant grammar points could be the use of present simple forms, adjectives, comparatives, superlatives, determiners, and pronouns. All right, let's look at another example taken from the learning standard, 2.1.2. Find out about and describe experiences up to now. So the relevant grammar that we can be used in language awareness are adverbs, present perfect, and question forms. Yeah, so teachers, you might need to be smart enough to identify, okay, what grammar points are needed to be taught in that particular unit. So when we consider the teaching of grammar, especially for year 5, we need to consider the cognitive ability of the pupils at that stage, okay? So when they are at the age of 10 or 11 years old, they are able to follow some grammar explanation. Okay, they are able to follow some simple explanations, but these need to be simple, and we cannot use complex grammar terminology, because if we use those complex grammar terminology, they might not find your lesson stimulating, and it might bore them. So we do not teach grammar directly to the students. Instead, we should adopt a learning and learner-centered approach. Okay? So the learning-centered grammar teaching, it should be interactive and meaningful, and it requires active participation and use of language. So the most important thing is that the students have to use the language. Then only they can slowly acquire grammar based on that. It is not like the teacher introduced the grammar terms with the grammar rules, and then they have to memorize a list of verbs with their different forms. It doesn't work like that, all right? The students have to use the language and to participate actively in the materials in order to acquire the grammar points or the language structure. So, okay, we move on to the language awareness lesson. So, language awareness lessons are an opportunity for you to plan, review, and extension activities to practice grammar covered in the textbook unit. So it is usually at the end of the unit where if you think that there is a need for you to revise a certain grammar point or a certain skill, then you can revisit those points or language skills in your grammar awareness lessons. Yeah, but how do we decide? How do we decide what skill to be focused on or what grammar point to be used? It is depending on the information that you get from the formative assessment that you carry out in your previous lessons. So when you teach a particular unit, of course, you will carry out formative assessment from time to time, right? So from the information you obtained from the formative assessment, then you can make a decision on what kind of skill or grammar point that should be revisited. And similar to other lessons like listening, speaking, reading, or writing, your language awareness lessons should be presented and practiced using a main skill and a complementary skill. Okay, so it is the same. There must be two skills mentioned in your lesson plan, okay, for a language awareness lesson. So for teachers to design your language awareness lesson, you need to identify one main skill and one complementary skill that match with the grammar focus. So it is very important for a teacher to unpack the learning standards, okay, the DSKP, in order to identify what are the matching skills that can be taught in one single lesson. All right. So next, I'm going to show you an example of a language awareness lesson that you can find from your SOW. Okay, this is lesson 34, language awareness 2, the second language awareness lesson, which is taught, which is expected to be taught, okay, at the end of unit 1. Because for year 5, there is a starter unit. So at the end of unit 1, that would be the second language awareness lesson. But if you look at the lesson provided in the SOW, you will see that the content standard and the learning standard are not provided because teachers have to come out with the focus skills based on the formative assessment. Based on the formative assessment that you carried out before that. So there are some activities suggested in the SOW, and teachers can adapt and adopt based on the needs of your students. Yeah, and of course, you can refer to the materials and the references provided by the ministry. And for the differentiation strategies as well, you have to decide what kind of strategy to be used based on the needs of your students. So there is a way for you to identify, to help you find out what kind of language focus to be focused on. At the end of each unit, in your student's book or in the textbook, you will see there is a review section, as well as a section for puzzles and games. So if you look at the language focus section, okay, you will be able to identify some of the pertinent language forms that needs to be practiced or the pupils have to be acquired in order to master that particular unit. So this will provide a guidance for you to decide what kind of skills to be included for your language awareness lessons. And of course, to make your lesson more interactive, you can also incorporate some puzzles and games in teaching language awareness. So there are a lot of activities, a lot of suggested activities in your textbook actually. So I find that the textbook is actually a very useful material for teachers to plan your teaching activity. Yeah, and this is the same section for Unit 2. So, okay, I enlarge some of the chosen language focus for you to look at, okay, so that you know that how convenient it is for you to carry out your language awareness lessons based on the materials and the resources available. So for this particular activity, for your language focus, okay, we can practice the use of there's, there isn't, there are, or there aren't. Or maybe you can incorporate writing skills in this particular activity. And here, there is a review on the skill focusing on the language form, is there, are there, or how many. So maybe you can incorporate speaking skill in this particular activity. And this is actually an example of the game, okay, taken from the textbook, okay? It is Comparative Bingo. It is an activity for you to teach comparative adjectives in a more interactive manner. All right, so teaching language awareness can also be fun, okay? It can also be gamified in many ways. Or if you are still not convinced with all these activities, you can also revisit the previous lessons that you have covered, and you identify the relevant language forms that you have already taught in your previous lessons. And you decide which language forms to be revisited when you carry out your language awareness lessons. Okay, for your information, in our DSKP also, we have a list of grammar points that are expected to be taught in year 5. It is a very useful document for you to have an overview about what are the grammar points that are being covered in the year 5 syllabus. And also, there is a list of recycle and consolidate grammar form, which is from year 4, okay, from the previous years. And also some of the language main functions that pupils are expected to perform by the end of the schooling year. So if we really know how to utilize the documents or the materials provided, planning a language awareness lesson is not that difficult. Yeah. If you want to look at what kind of language focus or what kind of language forms that are being taught in your particular unit, you can also refer to the content page of your textbook. Okay. You can see here in the content page, the language focus for each unit is listed out. All right, so I think that's all for the language awareness lessons. Okay, if you have some good practice or some interesting information to be shared, you can also comment in the comment section. Yeah, you can also comment in the chat box so that maybe we can interact with each other. All right. So moving on, I'm going to touch on language arts, or in other words, Children's Contemporary Literature, CCL. Okay, language arts in the curriculum, it is actually one of the regular parts of the year 5 syllabus, right? It has been repeated in the learning cycle together with the other 4 language skills. But this language arts is a component where it is less restricted. It is less restricted, and it gives pupils the opportunity to encounter and use English more freely in literary contexts. So from language arts lessons, pupils can develop more extensive reading and listening skills. They develop the skills, and we also ask for their personal and creative responses based on the exploration of text that they have read. All right. So these are some of the materials that are available for you to teach language arts lessons. Okay, the first one is the Anthology of Poems that pupils are using from year 4 to year 6. And also for year 5, we have a short story called And Something Weird Happened, and a graphic novel, Gulliver's Travels. And teachers should be noted that the guidebook from BPK is also available on the BPK website, and it has been around since the previous KSSR syllabus actually. So if you want to plan your lessons, you can also refer to the teacher's guidebook, and there are a lot of handouts and materials that you can adapt and adopt in your lessons. So this is an example of a language arts lesson as stated in the SOW. All right. So I put a red circle here because I want to draw your attention on this particular part, because in a language arts lesson, it must be complemented with one of the 4 skills. Okay. It can be either listening, speaking, reading, or writing here for the complementary skill. Okay, so let's go through the lesson part by part, all right? So this is the main learning standard. Of course, for a language arts lesson, the main learning standard should be 5 point something, all right? Because it is related to language arts. So for this particular lesson, the main learning standard is respond imaginatively and intelligibly through creating simple role plays, simple poems, or other imaginative responses as appropriate. So a suggested learning objective for this lesson is that pupils will be able to come up with different versions of ice cream and dinosaurs according to their creativity. So the learning objective for a language arts lesson is slightly different from the learning objectives in the previous 4 skills mentioned by the previous presenters. Because in the writing of the learning objective, for 4 skills, right, we have to follow the SMART principle. Whereas for learning, for language arts, the learning objective doesn't have to be measurable, because we are not trying to restrict the pupil's creativity here. All right. So for the writing of the learning objective for language arts lessons, the learning objective doesn't have to be measurable, but it has to be complemented with one of the 4 skills, as I mentioned earlier. So for this particular lesson, the complementary learning standard is focusing on the writing skill 4.2.4, describe people, places, and objects using suitable statements. So the learning objective is still following the previous style, okay, the SMART principle. Pupils will be able to describe their ice cream and dinosaurs using at least 5 words. So let's look at each stage of the lesson, okay? For the pre-lesson, okay, teacher provides lines for pupils to guess the words by giving letters for teachers to verify whether the letter is present in the word. So there are some focus words for the pupils to guess, and it refers to pre-lesson task 7 with the teacher. If teachers are not familiar with the activity, you can actually find it in the front section of the SOW, okay, there is a more detailed description on how to carry out the pre-lesson and the post-lesson activities. So actually, our SOW has got a lot of information for teachers to refer to. Yeah. So this is the description on how to carry out pre-lesson 7, yeah, with the teacher. So it is a game kind of similar to Hangman, in which the pupils have to guess the words. The pupils have to guess the word written on the whiteboard, and if they guess the letter wrongly, the teacher will start writing the face. So if the pupils cannot guess the word and the teacher manages to draw the whole face before the pupils manage to guess the word, then the pupils cannot beat the teacher. So the pupils have to guess the word before the teacher manages to draw the whole face. So it is quite similar with the game called Hangman. So for lesson delivery, pupils read the text in group. Okay, we can have some ideas here how the activities for a language arts lesson can be carried out. So first, pupils read the text in groups, and then each group has to draw Joel's Jelly Baby Ice Cream. If you are familiar with the story, then you know that it is some of the imaginative things that Joel created, yeah, in his essay. So after that, pupils draw the dinosaurs that Joel had imagined, and in pairs, each pair has to come up with the different version of ice cream and dinosaurs according to their creativity. So here it involves a lot of drawing, a lot of expressions of pupils' creativity here. Yeah, it's not about forcing the pupils to come up with some linguistic outputs. No. For language arts lessons, it can be more expressive and it can be done, the product can be in many forms, all right, as to suit to students' creativity needs. So pupils describe their creation, the ice cream and dinosaurs, by using simple sentences. So at the end of the lesson, post-lesson activity, pupils can provide their predictions on what will happen to Joel when the dinosaurs meet Joel. Because for this lesson, it is just focusing on a particular chapter of the short story. So maybe they can, the pupils can predict what will happen next in the next chapter. So the differentiation strategy that we can do in this lesson is differentiate by the outcome expected from pupils, which is strategy 3. From this, in this lesson, pupils are not restricted in terms of their linguistic outputs. When they describe their designed ice cream or dinosaurs, they can use words, phrases, or full sentences to describe them. Okay, so this is a form of differentiation strategy in terms of the output. Okay, so if you refer to the teacher's guidebook provided by BPK, you can actually find some interesting handouts that you can use for your lesson. Like for example, this one, there is a recipe teaching students how to make vanillicious ice cream, okay, with the recipes and the steps. And here, there is a handout for teachers to conduct the group activities in which the pupils have to draw the dinosaurs based on the parts of the dinosaur's body. All right, so they have to complete the whole drawing of the dinosaur based on the part of the dinosaur that they receive. Okay, so when we conduct language arts lessons, they can be more creative. They can express themselves in various forms or various ways. And also, teachers are highly encouraged to conduct project-based learning in if we have in accordance to the scheme of work, okay, there will be 2 project-based learning lessons, but actually it is based on the needs of the students, as well as it is based on the teacher's decision to decide whether or not to carry out the project-based learning lessons. But teachers are highly encouraged to do so. And when you implement project-based learning, it is up to the teachers to select the content standard or the learning standard relevant to your pupils' learning needs. The unit doesn't have to be the unit stated here in the SOW. It is up to the teacher to decide which unit to be done for your PBL. So teachers have the power to decide what kind of activities or what kind of skills to be emphasized when we carry out project-based learning lessons. Yeah. So all in all, I believe that we are all provided with enough materials and resources for us to plan our language awareness as well as our language arts lessons. So if teachers are able to utilize those materials and resources, I think it shouldn't be a problem for teachers to plan their lessons well. So I think that's all for my section. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ma. Very cool, very relaxed, and thank you for sharing about language
You're
art
welcome.
and language awareness, especially
You're
the
welcome.
suggested activities that we can find in the textbook. All right. So can we have all the presenters for the Q&A session? All right, so we now have 5 presenters. As you can see, today Ms. Madihah and Mr. Ma are presented. And then yesterday, it was 3 presenters as well. We have Ms. Lim, Ms. Freida, and Ms. Vilo. So I have a few questions. For the first question, I think it's from the comment section. Can I use Oxford Dictionary for dictionary activities? Maybe Miss Madihah wants to answer that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Ms. Syarifah, for the question, and thank you, teachers, for the question. So basically, teachers, you may use any dictionary because our main documents is only the DSKP, the SOW, and the textbook. So any dictionary, feel free to use it, and you can actually expose students to different types of dictionary because basically it's just the publisher. Yeah, and in fact, we can actually expose the students the dictionary that they can find over the internet. Yeah, so yes, of course you may use Oxford Dictionary. I hope that answers.
Yeah, I think that answers the questions. All right, so moving on to the next questions. Why are we teaching language arts when it's not assessed in PBD? Anyone wants to answer? Or maybe we can have Mr. Ma answers that questions. Why are we teaching language arts when it's not assessed in PBD?
All right. The aim of teaching language arts is actually to give students a more relaxed environment to learn the language, so that they have the opportunity to learn the language in a less restricted way, and they have the chance, the opportunity to express themselves more freely and more creatively, and also to give them the opportunity to enjoy the beauty of the language. So that is why our BBK decided to include the language arts lesson in our curriculum, even though it is quite different from the four skills in our learning cycle. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ma. All right, maybe I have one more questions. Why does SK has more lessons than SJK? Anyone would like to answer?
Okay, maybe I can answer that.
All right. Yes,
if
please,
you
Ms.
refer-
Madihah.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Syarifah. So if you refer to the letter provided every year from our jabatan and also our PPT, this mentioned that the period of lessons for SK per week this is a normal classroom lesson. It's 300 minutes. As compared to SJK, there's only for tahap 2, for level 2, it's like 180 minutes per week and 150 minutes per week for level 1. So that is another reason why the lessons for SJK is lesser as compared to SK. Yeah. Yes. I hope that answers.
Maybe teachers from SJK, like Miss Lim and Mr. Ma, wants to add about it?
Because in SJK, we also have to, the pupils have to learn Mandarin as well. So the interaction hour for English lesson is actually lesser. Yeah, so that is why in the SOW, there are less lessons in comparison with SK.
All right. Okay. Thank you for that, Mr. Ma. So I think, is there any more questions from the comment section? Let me see. I think that's all. All right. Anything else that any of the presenters wants to add?
Can I add something just to what
Yes,
Mr. Ma
please.
said just now about the language arts lesson, right? And what based on what Mr. Ma said just now, actually, if you look at the DSKP, the learning objectives in the DSKP for the language arts component is actually to expose the pupils to the aesthetic part of the language, not to expose them to the skills per se, but to expose them to the aesthetic part of the language. And at the same time, in one way, it actually prepares them because when they go on to secondary school, right, they have literature in secondary school. So it's like exposing them to literature before they actually formally study literature in secondary school. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Is there anything else from other presenters?
May I add as well?
Yes, please. Yes, Miss Freida,
Okay,
please.
thank you. So, same thing about language art. It is an opportunity for less proficient pupils to enjoy using the language in a non-threatening way that they feel, they can express themselves creatively, right? So when they feel good about the language, they would want to learn about it more. So in hopes of encouraging them to learn the language in class and as well as expressively. That's what it's for. That's all from me.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Miss Freida. And like one of the viewers said, the language art lesson help builds people's interest and confidence in English language. And it's for me, my pupils are always looking forward for language art lessons. Yes, I do agree with that. Like what Mr. Ma has presented just now, language arts can be very fun and interesting. It might be like an extra fun activities to do at school. All right, so I think since there's no more questions from the comment section, and before we go to the last slot today for the closing speech, maybe we can have the attendance list, attendance link in the comment section. Hold on. We are putting up the attendance link. Okay, but we will, all right, the attendance link is there, but for our last slot today, let us hear the closing speech for this 2 days webinar by Datin Nur Farida binti A. Bakar, Timbalan Pengarah, Sektor Pembelajaran, Jabatan Pendidikan Negeri Selangor. Please welcome Datin Nur Farida.
Sorry, Latin is not here. So, yeah.
All right.
It's okay. I'll be representing on behalf of GPN Selangor. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening, for being with us today. Okay, for 2 days. All right. Year 5 curriculum induction webinar. Ironing out the creases. Okay, so thank you so much to Miss Moderator. Thank you to the presenters, all right. Miss Viloshena, Mr. Ma, we have Miss Lim, Miss Freida, and also Miss Madihah. Thank you so much for your commitment, your effort, okay, and for the sharing session, all right. Actually, for your information, actually, GPN Selangor, we have plan actually for us to have a refresher course at the beginning. We want to do it face to face because we want to get the teachers to involve actively during the course. But then because of the pandemic, so we had to change our plan, and this is one of the contingency plan, okay, and we decided to come up with a webinar style curriculum induction. So teachers, if you're busy, if you don't have any time, you can just listen to this webinar whenever you're free. Okay, so you can go back, and if you have like any doubt or any questions, you can refer back to the YouTube. All right, to the video. So I think the content of today's session, I think it helped a lot, whereby the presenters, I think they have gone in depth with the topic that they presented. Okay, so thank you so much. Again, thank you so much for your time, for your effort. Okay, and hope to see you, all of you, soon. Okay, maybe in the future. All right, and take care and stay safe. All right. Okay, and don't forget to fill in the attendance link. All right. Okay, thank you, everyone. All right.
All right, thank you. Thank you to Ms. Zahira. Ms. Zahira is a penolong pengarah bahasa, Sektor Pembelajaran from Selangor State Education Department. So ladies and gentlemen, the attendance link is already there. So don't forget to key in your attendance. So with that, we have come to the end of our webinar for today. So our part 2, it's been an honor and privilege to be the moderator these 2 days. And a special thanks for the presenters. Yesterday we had Ms. Lim, Ms. Freida, and Ms. Vilo. And today we have Ms. Madihah and Mr. Ma. And also to the organizers, English Language Unit, Selangor State Education Department, Puan Hajah Nisa and Ms. Zahira. And to the team backstage as well. And of course to all of you, our wonderful audience, for spending time to join us today. So we hope through this webinar, you're able to take away a lot of useful information and sharing sessions just now and ideas for the benefit of our students. So thank you everyone once again for joining us. For those who have missed any of our webinar yesterday and today, don't worry, as you can find these webinars on the JPS YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and like the channel. So till then, I'm Syarifah Nazurah signing off. Assalamualaikum and bye-bye.